Hello, this is David Klotz, and you're listening to the Monday Morning Critic podcast.
Perfect. I cannot get over the amount of cool things you have behind you. Um, uh, w- I, I mean, my movie trivia is lacking. My knowledge is lacking at this point. But
Hmm.
why does it look that the red with the eyes looks so familiar to me? Is that a Godzilla esque?
It's a slee stack. It's a red slee stack from it's not mine, it's my wife's. It's do you remember that show from the 70s? Oh my god,
Why?
I'm
I'm so
embarrassing
that's
myself.
that. Well, that's exactly how I feel right now. The sleeve stack, and I feel like it's like something I should know like this. Like I recognize it as easy as I recognize like a stormtrooper. Like I feel like I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, totally. It was my childhood. It was Land of the Lost. It was a show that was on.
Ah, the Land of the Lost. That's right. Will
Yeah,
Ferrell did a remake of it. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Beautiful,
yeah,
man.
I've got a life-size costume that I can wear at Halloween.
Very nice, very nice. I gotta say, well, first let me say, is your wife clearly is a movie buff?
Yeah, she's a writer. She writes horror films. But that's actually from a music video she made for her band many years ago. The drummer wore a slee stack outfit,
And
and
you've been in a band too, right? You guys kind of have your own bands outside of your professional work, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've yeah. I mean, that was sort of like my coming out of college. A dream of mine was to be in a band and go on tour and make albums and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I still make music like in that regard too. But I have all these other more pressing things like TV shows to work on. But I love I was in a band called Fonda back in the day, and I have this synth project now called Dream System 8 too, which is fun.
Very nice. And when
Yeah.
it comes to bands, I have to tell you, David, I'm always like, I mean, I was the oddball on the field trip. I would always be listening to composition, I'd be John Williams or, whomever. I mean, I did like vocal music. I loved AC/DC, Led Zeppelin. I mean, go on and on. But I've always been drawn to film composition. Um,
Yeah, me too.
in reverse for you, though, I mean, you talked band a little bit, talked your wife band a little bit. Who, as far as vocal singers, as far as greats, who has done it for you, David? Not film score composers, but like just vocals and bands and so forth.
Yeah, I guess early on, I grew up. I was interested in a lot of um, pop music, like early synth stuff, like Depeche Mode and Human League. That kind of stuff was really influential to me.
Mm.
As I got into college, I loved artists like the Smiths and REM and the Stone Roses. I count as one of my favorite all-time bands of all time. But a lot of British influenced kind of a lot of British uh,
Mm.
indie bands kind of influenced a lot of the kind of the songwriting that I did myself.
While we're talking about bands, while you were speaking, I was thinking, there's a band and I can't remember the name of it. It's something boys, and it's very much like the genre you're talking about, and I think it's an
Mm,
English group. And I'll figure it out by the time the interview's
okay.
over. But like, I'm
Yeah.
so mad that I can't come up with it like this. But let's talk about vocal music because David, your work is amazing for those listening or watching.
Oh, thanks.
Um, in all due respect to the Police, Pat Benatar, Kate Bush, Metallica, can we please, not you and I, but others, can we please give some credit to Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein? Can we please, in the lengthy staff of people that are editing music on Stranger Things, can we please give some credit to these people? Like, finally, come on.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Kyle and Michael are amazing, and I think one of the greatest things about this show is their contribution and their score, and it's they're such an identity to Stranger Things, and they're amazingly creative and fun to work with, and I love. Yeah, every season gets better and better with them, and their skill set grows as the show has been growing, and it's been sort of fun to be a part of that team in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because before this season came out, and listen, I love Kate Bush. I'm an 80s kid at heart. I mean, I love them. But I
Yeah.
mean, if we played Running Up That Hill versus the intro to Stranger Things, I would be curious to know what more people recognize. And I just feel like I'm not taking away from Kate Bush, But
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
about times this, including you, this entire musical crew that has been just at it for so long, gets there just to come on, David. It's about
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I remember the Kate Bush song when it came out in the '80s, and when it became when we were using it in the show, I was like, oh, this is very cool, and I loved all the things we were doing. You know, we had an orchestral arrangement done and a very cool remix done, and I was pleased to see that the song has sort of taken on a new life and a new generation. My son, in fact, who's 12, put it on his Spotify playlist and loved it. And I thought that was sweet. He's never heard of her before.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
this is sort of it's fun to see that happening. But at the same time, I'm more really involved with Kyla Michaels' score, and I think I sort of uh, yes, I really enjoy that. I feel like the score that they have done for the show is something new and original. It has its references to the past and sort of to the genre of synth music, but I think they're sort of creating cool modern versions of that in a way. Like it doesn't. I mean, season one had this sort of retro feel to it, but I feel like they're doing something more. They're taking. I love when they're taking these sort of keyboards and synths that were sort of popular in the '80s, and they're sort of finding ways to wrench out really dark sounds out of them that haven't been
Yeah,
done before.
yeah. Do you think, David, some people underappreciate it? Do you feel like film composition, the way you guys do it, even American Horror Stories, whatever, whatever show you're talking about, do you think it's
Yeah.
just, it's so impactful that people miss it? Whereas a vocal type of track, the Kate Bushes, the Police, the Pat Benatar, whomever, is obvious because we grew up with them, we know them. But I feel like film composition goes underappreciated and underrecognized. But like, I can, like, if I was sitting with somebody, I could say and point out how many times, let's just say Stranger Things, that the film composition sets up a huge moment in a huge scene. And I almost feel like, I don't know, it's underappreciated and underrecognized.
Yeah, I agree. It's sometimes it's just there to sort of function to help. It's there to function to tell the story and work for the narrative in a way. So if it's doing its job and you're really invested in the story and the show, maybe it kind of most of the time film music will, as it's playing as underscore, it'll sort of fly under the radar while you're enjoying the film. And I feel like there's not a lot of I mean there are opportunities in shows and TVs for the film score to shine and be like a big moment, but a lot of that gets most of it's used as underscore, and then they're using songs instead of score for bigger moments. And so yeah, I think it's sort of, a lot of it goes unnoticed. A lot of really good stuff, I feel like.
Yeah. David, every musical score isn't the Jurassic Park da na na. Like, it's not everything isn't announced like with a kick through the door. And you're so right with what you're saying.
Yeah, but also to that extent, I feel like filmmakers also sort of don't want that anymore. I hate to be sort of negative and old fashioned about like, oh, there's not the way we used to do it in the old days, but there's not, there isn't a lot of room in films and TV shows for what John Williams was able to get away with in his scores. And a lot of it, sometimes big bold melodies aren't sort of, they're not really a very current thing, like they used to be.
David, I know you appreciate a lot of the colleagues and peers you have with you. And I find a lot of the composers I have on my show, they tiptoe around this question. And you
Hmm.
can, if you want. Who are some composers that you absolutely love? And that's not to say anyone you leave out that you don't love and respect.
Yeah.
But who do you, I mean, if you want to just throw on the word lately, who have you been listening to lately?
Yeah.
But who is
I
it?
mean,
Who are some
like
composers?
working today or all time favorites?
All time, David, all
Oh,
time.
all time. Well, I mean, my favorite composer of all time is Maurice Jarre, who's probably most famous for the scores that he did for Lawrence of Arabia and Doctor
Mm.
Zhivago and A Passage to India. And I love, he's just amazing. Those scores are brilliantly orchestrated, but he also went through a period in the 80s where he experimented himself with synth scores, and I think some of his synth stuff that he did was really underrated, and no one really has paid attention to that much. I mean, the biggest thing he did, it was in 1985, was Witness, the Peter Weir film, and
Yeah.
his score for that was entirely done with synthesizers. And he was such a classical composer type at the time that the way he had done it, as I understand, is he had brought in a lot of like the best synth players of its time, like Michael Boddicker, all these amazing session synth guys, and had them in a studio and kind of almost conducted them like he would an orchestra. And I don't know if
Wow.
this is true or not, but I think this is the mythology that went around the creation of that score. And you can kind of tell when you listen to it now, it feels very live and has this energy and electricity to it that's very unlike any other synth score. But he's my favorite composer, not just for the Witness and stuff, but even all of his other stuff. I just find the melodies he wrote are timeless, and I aspire to create something like that someday.
Great answer. If I gun to your head, if you had to pick a second, who'd you pick?
Second,
you thought you got through it once, but now I have to bring you back into it again.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I mean, John Williams is always somebody he's probably the greatest. Vangelis would probably be my second, I think. I love all of his stuff, Blade Runner, and
good stuff. Yeah,
really amazing composer.
Yeah. David, earlier I told you I'd come up with the name of the band I was thinking about.
Yeah,
it was the Pet Shop Boys.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I'm kind of on track with what you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
Totally,
yeah. So David, explain to people. So you're like, I like to think the one thing I do really well in my podcast is introduce people to a wide array of the filmmaking business and what it really, not business, I shouldn't say that. The movie making process is a better way. What is a music editor? Because you've been a music editor on some pretty prestigious projects, and I have to believe it's a position of trust. It's a position of when somebody brings you aboard as an editor, they really have to believe in what you're bringing to the table. Tell me about what your role is. You're a composer too, and we'll get to that, but just the music editor part, David.
I've been fortunate. When I kind of moved to Los Angeles coming out of college, I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. Was sort of work. I was doing all sorts of things, and I was fortunate having a job at a music department at a film studio early on, where I got to see all these different sort of roles of what people did in the business, from composer to scoring engineer to music supervisor to music editor, and I sort of gravitated to that job. Part of one of my jobs was hiring music editors and getting them travel to scoring sessions, and so I did a lot. I learned a lot, and I watched what they did, and because I didn't have a formal training as a composer, I thought music editorial was something I could get into, and so that was one of the first jobs I started out as, and it varies from project to project, but essentially as a music editor, you are the person that's sort of physically putting the music into the show. You're working with the composer, you're working with the music supervisor, and you're cutting the music to picture. And this is in the simplest terms. There's a sort of a lot of technical stuff that goes along with it.
Sure.
But part of the challenges with something like that is the composer will score the show and record an orchestra, and you get delivered all these tracks. You have everything split out, and you're putting it into the show. And then the next day, the picture editor is telling you, oh, we're changing the picture. The scene's completely changed. So, after they've spent $100,000 recording this big score, you have to find a way to still make it work, and not only hitting all the right beats and moments, but also at the same time, keeping the integrity of the music so it doesn't sound all chopped up. And that's kind of the big a chore that we have is always sort of making sure the music's working. Um, there's also the with we're also working with songs. Sometimes there are picture um, complications where say we might you might film somebody performing live or singing, so you want to make sure the lip sync is all playing in time. So that's kind of like most part of the process. And another challenge is sometimes when things do change, we find out that music isn't working. So sometimes we're having to cut cut the score or find another piece of score from another episode and fly it into the show and make that work better. It can get really creative, like mixing and matching elements from different score cues. And
Oh, David, is can I substitute the word frustrating for creative sometimes for you? Like you said,
oh
it
yeah,
can get
oh my god,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No, sometimes I
Yeah.
pull my hair out with some of the things that are asked of me at the 11th hour, like, hey, we have to finish this tomorrow, and oh yeah, this whole section needs to be reworked or it doesn't work.
Do you think so you are a composer, and do you feel like being an editor is a crucial part of being a composer? Do you feel like it definitely assists in that process of being?
Yeah, for sure. I feel
Yeah,
like the skills I had as an editor has been helping me greatly as a composer, and sort of the way I work that too is because also I think because also I didn't study music. I didn't go to music school. I'm not like a skilled orchestrator or arranger as say some of the great composers who I work with who went to like Berklee School of Music. So for me, that process takes longer, and because of that, if I'm scoring a episode of American Horror Story season 2 right now, and I worked with the editor, and I'm like, as soon as you have a scene cut together, send it over, because I would rather have more time
sure.
to
Yeah,
write and come up with a theme and that and so I feel like I'll score this scene, which is like 2 minutes long. I'll write all the parts and come up with all the record it, send the stems over. But by the time the producer and he has a pass and everything, and by the time I get to it ends up being chopped up and cut down a lot. And that's when most composers want to come in, when the picture's close to being locked. Where I've sort of done work before, but I know that my skills as a music editor, I will do what I can to use what I got to spend weeks writing, cutting that to work with us with the scene that's been cut down and work. And sometimes it doesn't always work, and I do have to start over and write again. But oftentimes I feel like there's something that I can salvage that I had started with that I can continue using and build upon.
no, that's a great answer. And Berkeley means nothing in a sense that you don't have to have a Berkeley background because you're clearly skilled at what you do. What is your background, David? College? Like what kind of kid were you? I mean, what I usually open up with this, but I've
Mhm.
waited 20 minutes into the
Oh yeah.
interview.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Sorry about that, but
That's okay. I loved movies, and I wanted to work in the movies as a kid. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I dreamed of moving to Los Angeles, and I as a kid, I would stay home on Friday nights while my friends would go out to hang out and go to the mall or whatever. But I would rent a stack of VHS movies from Blockbuster,
nice.
and I'd watch movies all weekend, and I sort of I had this passion. I didn't know I loved music, but I also was interested in writing and directing, and just all aspects of films were fun to me. And so I went to film school. I went to Emerson College in Boston,
Yep.
and I got to meet people who were just like me, who were super film nerds, and I think that was that helped fuel my desire to keep going. And I moved to Los Angeles right after I graduated, and yeah.
I feel
That's
like Emerson's not the first time I've heard
hmm.
that school being mentioned. And I went to Northeastern, so you and I are kind of
Oh, we were there. Yeah,
you guys are you and I are Boston brothers, I guess.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so you've done so many wonderful things. Like I mean, I'm looking at your. There was an interview I was watching today. It was a great one. You know, they were passionate. It was a San Diego Comic Con 2019. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
One of the guys definitely thought you were Romain Javadi. He kept talking to you like you created,
Probably.
like
Yeah.
yeah, but you know what? You've done a lot of the hauling of a lot of these projects. Uh, David, what's your take on Comic Cons? Right, so like right now, it's San Diego Comic Con's big. Like
Yeah.
the and I've said this on other interviews, and I'm on a run of wonderful Things guests, and so blessed to have you on the show. But I feel like you know people, oh yeah, Comic Cons this and that, but like the San Diego Comic Con really brings forth the next 5 years of what's ahead in TV and movies. Like it's huge. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing to compare it to. Talk about your experience in Comic Cons, David, especially San Diego.
Yeah, well, I've only been once, and I did a panel a couple years ago before the pandemic, I think 2019, and it was fun to be there and see that and sort of get a sort of get a window to everything that because I'm my finger is not on the pulse of what's happening in you know in the world. So it was sort of eye opening to see, because I would see these a lot of people spending massive amounts of money to promote these games and these things that I've never heard of, and these properties and upcoming films, and it was exciting. It was a bit overwhelming, I think, you know, and I I I I guess I don't. Maybe when I was much younger, I would be more excited by it. I'm just sort of more focused on sort of kind of what I'm doing, um, and yeah, I don't know. When I was there, I just kept thinking like, oh, my son would love this place, you know.
Underrated part of your filmography,
Mm.
as far as music goes, is Perry Mason. I love the music for Perry Mason. Like
Oh, cool.
it went underrated, I think, for more than just music. Like I
Yeah,
enjoyed it. Robert Downey Jr. I think poured his heart into it, but I love the music. I thought it was really creative, really well done. So
yeah.
kudos to you, sir, for that. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I actually was on that show for a short amount of time because I was so busy. I had to bow out early on that show,
Mm.
but yeah, yeah. I did watch it on HBO when it came out, and yeah, it was.
Just a really well done. Like a lot of your filmography, for those listening, you know, Iron Man, Stranger Things, Game of Thrones, American Horror Stories. Like you just have a phenomenal, filmography. Is there a Game of Thrones scenes, David, that sits with you? This is such. I ask this on
Hmm,
every interview, but is there a
yeah.
Game of Thrones scenes that sits with you more than others? I mean, for me, it's Battle of the Bastards. It's anything with the Hound. I mean, I don't know. Pick your poison.
Yeah,
But
I mean, all the big set piece battle scenes from all this series, you know, season, they've always been the most challenging, as far as mixing with sound design and music, and the hardest one was the Long Night, which was the one which episode
ah,
3 from
yeah,
the last season,
yep.
and that was tricky because I just we we our composer Ramin had started working early when, you know, there was certain visual effects that are done, and that's one where visual effects came in later, and there was a lot of there's just a lot of trying to fix the music, and then there was you know, with our producers David and Dan having a very specific idea of what the music should be doing, and then the director Miguel also had very specific ideas. So there was just there was a lot of really amazing like points of view on how the music should work through that whole battle sequence, which is pretty much almost basically the whole episode. And then coupled that with all the constantly changing shots and things, and there's a lot of there was, remember, Ramin had a lot of tempo in the score, and so when you suddenly have to like cut out you know, a shot, suddenly you got to find ways to keep that tempo in time, and yeah, I remember we spent at least a month on the mix stage, you know, with the sound designers and the sound mixers, and just trying to work with them to get it right, because that one had a lot of battles where music was really big, and then oh wait, the sound guys brought in these giant sounds for the dragons and stuff, so that was really big, and there was just a lot of back and forth, like, well, hey, this should be, what are we doing here? We can't hear the music because you guys are playing the dragon sounds too loud, and it got contentious.
But David, here's a lesson to those like watching this podcast or listening to this podcast. Like everyone's talking about writing and this and that. Like what you're facing is as integral a part of developing an episode. You know, the sounds. In this case, we're talking about the dragons and what you're trying to bring and what the
Yeah,
like. That's a struggle. Like that is something I don't think the average film goer or TV binger or whatever you want to, they don't
yeah, they
realize
have no
that.
idea. No, they don't know really anything that what the process is. Yeah, unfortunately, and and that's just part of the deal. It's like no glory.
Yeah, David, what is something that you love as a composer that you don't have to deal with? Like, so as a music editor, there are things you have to deal with. Is
Yeah.
there something as a composer that you don't have to do as part of your duties that you did as a music editor that you're kind of relieved of, right? I would
Oh,
imagine you're a little bit more I don't want to say in charge because that sounds really
yeah.
like a dictatorship.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I hate most about music editing, and it's sort of, I guess this is not good for composers either, is temp music. Like I just, I don't know. I've reached my end of the rope, my line. I just can't deal with it anymore. I hate cutting in temp music, for shows,
David, explain to people and maybe even me
Oh
what
yeah. So okay.
temp
So
music
yeah,
is.
I'm sorry because that's all. I just think
No, no, I've heard
I
that a
forget who
lot.
I'm talking to.
I think I know. I think I know what it is, but I want to make sure I know what it is.
So part of the process of putting the show together is we get to the point when the picture editors assemble a scene, and they're putting the show together. Everything's cutting together, and it's still early for to bring in the composer to start writing music. So what's normally done is the picture editors and the music editor will start cutting in what we call temp music, which is basically taking any music that you want from any score. I can pull in the John Williams score from something he did, and we just start putting it into the show as basically placeholders. So to see how the scene's going to work, if we know a scene needs music, when you assemble a scene and you put it together, the scene really doesn't quite work. If it's a scene that needs music, it really isn't going to work until you have the music in there. So
Right.
we're putting in temp music, to just be and live in the show, so that when it comes together, and when it's finally done and we have an editor's cut or a director's cut, the show or the movie is fully scored, but it's not with the composer's music. It's with anything
it's almost like a filler music, David, like a filler just to kind of
yeah,
occupy the space until the actual
right,
final piece is inserted. Do I have that correct?
exactly. The problem
Yeah.
is that it's suddenly taken on a much bigger
Gotcha.
thing, because now it's just like the temp music is so very labored over. I get notes as music editor, like, oh, this cue isn't working, try it, and oh, at this point this cue needs to turn and twist and hit this moment here. And as music editors, we're asked to do that. We're asked to almost like completely compose the show just by cutting in previously existing tracks from
Right.
other composers. And it gets worse than that. Directors and producers become attached to the temp music, and they love it. Sometimes it's just so perfect they don't want it to change. So oftentimes when the composer comes in, they're asked to do a version of what's in the temp, or this scene, we love this music, can you do that, something similar. And every composer that I've worked with, from the smallest indie composer to like the big guys at the top, like Hans Zimmer or whatever, they get asked to kind of copy or do a version of the temp, and it's sort of become just part of the practice of the industry now. And it's and it's a drag. And as a music editor, I hate I just don't enjoy cutting temp music.
So,
Um,
David, could there be a situation where the temp music is so far off from what the composer actually like believes and his style or her style,
yeah,
like the producers, directors, whomever can fall in love with the style that's not even anywhere near what the composer is used to? That
yeah,
happens.
yeah. And composers have been. It's not worked out with those composers if there's a creative conflict where usually we try to anticipate those things as a music editor. If I go into a film or a TV show, if they're saying like, hey, Ramin, who did Game of Thrones, he's going to compose this show. So, I go in, I'm not going to like, cut in Kyle and Michael's score from Stranger Things. Although Ramin would
Right.
actually do an awesome job at that too. But I mean, it's just like, it's a specific, I know to sort of work in, I mean, it's not so much like a lot of composers, really good composers, are very flexible to style and genre, but a lot of times you want to sort of you have an established like vision. You're sort of told like, hey, we're looking for this kind of score. This is
Sure,
going to
sure,
be
sure.
orchestral and maybe with some kind of modern kind of electronic stuff with it kind of thing. And so you kind of start as a guide for temp music, you're sort of working in that genre too, like you're thinking like the composer would think in a
Yeah,
way.
that makes sense to me. And, my now wife and I went to a Ramin. They had a show in Connecticut where he just did his Game of Thrones thing, and there was visuals.
Yeah.
David, I went to one with Ramin. I went to one with Hans Zimmer.
Oh,
Like
cool.
my next one, I swear to God, I swear to you on the life of my child, and I don't usually do this a lot. If Thomas Newman had one, I would pay $5,000 for a ticket. Like that's how much
Oh
I love
yeah,
him.
I love his
It's
music too. Yeah.
what makes. I have a couple of final questions, and thank you for all
Yeah.
this time you've given me. What makes, and I ask all my composers this, and people are like, "Will you please stop asking about Thomas Newman?" What makes Thomas Newman, like, I love, like, when people ask me, we were talking movies, like, who's the best composer? I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a ridiculous thing to answer because it's so tough. But I always feel like Hans Zimmer, Thomas Newman. But I feel like on most days, I am Thomas Newman's son. I am all about what he
Yeah.
is doing. What is it, David, about his music? Because like I feel like I'm in like I said, I'm listening to his stuff when most people are listening to, I don't know, music that's vocal led.
Yeah.
I don't know what is it, David, about him that makes me.
I don't know. I agree. I love his music. I think he's very good at at film scoring in a sense that he'll write a cue that can function to do the job that has to tell the story in a moment, but he never sort of loses sight of like what um, people love about why we listen to music, about like
Yeah, yeah,
melody and
yeah,
chords and things that sound good, and so
yeah.
just like something that you want to, that's just a delicious sounding cue that you want to hear again. I think he never like he's always sort of being able to marry the two of those together.
Nominated for 15 Academy Awards, has won zero. Explain that justice to me.
Wow,
It's
that's
ridiculous.
terrible.
It's
Yeah,
obnoxious. But it's enough with other people. Let's get into
yeah,
the last question for you is
yeah,
American Horror Stories. You're composing your music. I'm excited for you. We are big into American Horror Story and American Horror Stories. My wife and I love both. What a wonderful opportunity. Scary shows,
yeah,
wonderful shows. Yeah. Keep you at the edge of
yeah.
your couch or your seat. Talk about your experience, what it means to you, anything you want to get out there, David.
Yeah, well, it's I'm music it well, so American Horror Stories, season one, and it's the same for season two.
Yeah.
We have like basically a different composer for almost every episode. Season one, like Mac Quayle composed two. We had other composers, really talented people: Amanda Jones, Brittany Allen, Ariel Marks, Morgan Kibbe, and myself. And I for me, it was like I went to music school, because as a music editor, I got to work on each episode with a different composer and see like their kind of their styles and their methods and their sounds and sort of what they do. So it was thrilling to sort of be a part of it in that way. It was also challenging too, because everyone did things differently and delivered things differently, and I had to figure out how to every show is a different kind of puzzle to work on. But it's just it's such a fun show to work on because horror music is fun. It's so you kind of have just a lot of opportunities to just find and explore and create the most aggressive, craziest, weirdest soundscapes and things where you don't really get an opportunity like that in any other genre, where you're allowed to like be weird and do something cool. So that's been fun to work on.
David, people have explained this to me thousands of times, whether it's cinematographers or composers. I still don't understand the answer. So
Mm.
if I'm the showrunner or if I'm dictating how American Horror Stories works, why don't I just say, you know what, David Klotz, and I've had other people, other composers do this. Why don't they just say, hey, listen, David, why don't you take season 2? Here you go. I get what you're saying about learning from other people, and that 100% resonates with me. But why not say, hey, David, here you go. Here's season 2. Have at it. Or here's season 1. Have at it. Let's see what you can do. Why is it necessary? I guess it's with directors too in those. And I know other composers have said doing composition for television series is monotonous. It is very difficult.
Yeah.
It is very much unlike movies. But like, why not just hand the reins over to somebody and say, hey, this is what you can do? I feel like it's more complicated when you bring in 6 other people. Is that
it is very complicated, and I think if it were a show where it was just sort of one storyline and then it really wouldn't make sense to change a composer for each episode. But American Horror Stories is an anthology show, and it's not only the composer that changes, but there's the director and they have different writers, and so I think that the producers. I know like Alexis Martin Woodall, who's a producer I work with on this show. She's very smart in sort of figuring out like which composer is going to work with kind of which story, and she's very creative and likes and I think her her take on how that works with the directors and the composers and everything, I think really benefits the show and makes every show episode, because it's a different cast with each show, and so I think it sort of makes every show kind of special and stand out in a different way.
That's a great answer. That does make sense. David, before I let you go, what is around the corner for you? What do you want to throw out there? Anything you want to get out there? I'd be dying to hear.
The thing I co-scored a show that's coming out. I think later this year in September. It's called The Watcher. It's
nice.
It's a Ryan Murphy show. It's about the family.
For those listening, Ryan Murphy's American Horror Stories. For those listening, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has another limited series that's coming out on Netflix this fall. It's called The Watcher, and it's about it's a true story based about this family that moved out of Manhattan and bought this house in New Jersey, and they and after they'd moved in, it was their dream house, and they spent a lot of money buying it. They started getting these creepy letters in the mail saying, "I am the watcher of this house," and it's a really fun, scary but weird limited series with an amazing cast. And I had the opportunity to compose it with Morgan Kibbe, another amazing composer, and we worked on it together. And it was a really fruitful collaboration. And I think the music we did is great, and it's something that I'm been most proud of that so far that I've done.
Nice.
I can't wait for everyone to see that show.
Nice. So David, how many episodes did you guys co-score? Was how many episodes is that?
It was 7 total. Yeah, I believe. Yeah.
I gotta believe co-scoring is just a great opportunity if you're a composer. Just because it just eliminates a lot. I mean, granted, being a composer, but like so I love interviews because I learn a lot, and I feel like co-scoring is like one of those things where it's just so. Like I listen to you talk about The Watcher, and it makes me even more assured of how great co-scoring is. I feel like the two of you did a hell of a job on this without even seeing anything yet.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like you get two brains instead of one, and I feel like I think it was a benefit. It was a better for the show. That I mean, I like to think could have done a great job on my own, and Morgan definitely would have, but I think I came in because I'm I don't have as many credits. Still sort of finding my way as a composer, getting out of the music, still music editing. So I still have a lot to learn. And I sort of came into this with like, I have these really, big traditional kind of melody ideas and things. And sometimes Morgan was like, no, that's too traditional. Like we got to be weird and you got to just break out of it and do something like crazy. And sort of woke me up to like, oh yeah, right. We should experiment first before we fall into our like, traps of what a normal storytelling score would be. So it was a good experience for me to work with her. And
David, is that when you turn to Morgan and say, "Listen, you need to watch your mouth. I've been on Game of Thrones, and I've done." David, before I let you go, tell me one thing Morgan does really well.
Well,
I'm sure she does. I'm sure many things happen, but
she's an amazing composer and writes like really original, beautiful melodic score. She also, what she brought to The Watcher is she's a really good singer too. So a lot of her score had vocal melodies into it, and that really brought another sort of dimension to our score together. Because I would even like kind of write this piece, and I would, we did a lot of like back and forth. We didn't even work together in the same studio. I'd write this cue and send it to her, and then she'd kind of, take it, add a few things, and then she would sing on top of it and send it back, and I'd be like, whoa, this is a whole other like bigger thing. And it was really really fun. So
wow.
yeah.
What's the release date on that, David? Do they have one?
I don't know. I know I heard fall. I don't think anything yet, but I'm hoping we'll see something in September, but it's coming up, and I don't know. You never know.
I'm excited, David. Yeah. I thank you for all this time, and I hope you come back on the show. I loved having you.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did we
you're
talk
such
about Stranger Things? Did we? I don't know.
You know what? We talked. You know what? I want to say I had. It's been like a run of 6 or 7 Stranger. I had now that you tell me, I had the kid he gets killed early on. My mind's all about music at this point.
Yeah.
I had the actor who plays Wayne, the father of Eddie.
Oh,
I
cool.
had
Yeah.
What's his name? He gets killed early on. He's a journalist with glasses.
In season 4.
He's like in season 2. He's a journalist with Nancy. He gets. I can't believe.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure,
yeah.
I can't believe.
Yeah.
I had Rob Morgan, the sheriff. I had all these, but like,
Oh, cool.
I don't know, man. Like, I just when it comes to Stranger Things, man, like I feel like I've asked it so many times, so like I beat it over the head. But like, I have to say, the way they're able to capture the essence of the '80s, and I don't know how old you are, but I'm going to throw.
Yeah.
We're in vicinity in the same age.
Yeah.
I just love the way they capture the '80s, and
I agree. Yeah.
Your wife has to love that. Your wife seems like a movie guru and a movie buff. Does she appreciate Stranger Things like we do, David?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Before I let you go, who is your character that you gravitate to, and who is the character that your wife gravitates to?
And Stranger Things?
Yeah.
I
don't want to say gravitate. That's a heavy word.
Yeah.
That you love, that you see pieces of yourself in.
I think. I mean, I loved the like season 3. I loved when Steve and what's her name, Maya,
Nancy.
or not Nancy, but the new Maya's character. I don't know the characters. I should know this.
Who is she in the show?
She's the other female lead, essentially.
The one who plays Max.
No. Maya. I know her real name.
Ethan Hawke's daughter.
Ethan Hawke's daughter, yeah. Maya Hawke. Yeah. What's her character's name? I should know this. Why do I not know?
David, we got David, I'm thinking music, but we got there.
Yeah, I know. I loved the relationship they had working together at the ice cream store, and then how that developed and carried on through season 4. So the two of them, I think, are, I don't know, my favorite.
David, everyone's raving about Kate Bush, and I'm gonna come across as a Kate Bush hater, and I love her. I'm not. Like, everyone's raving about her and Metallica. For me, are you caught up? Have you seen all 4 seasons completely?
Oh yeah, many times.
So I'm gonna tell you, for me, like the snowball dance when they bring in Cyndi Lauper, the Police, and Pat Benatar. For
Yeah.
me, like that was like that hit home to my middle school feels. Like that hit all
Yeah.
of them, you know.
Yeah. That was fun because it was like a year, over a year ago. They had sent me that scene to cut some temp score to it, but also to they had the songs, you know, already decided on, and they want and I so I cut them in that whole sequence, going from the police going into Dream a Little Dream, and that, you know, that whole snowball sequence. And because it was early on, I had all this time. I actually took the songs and I ran them through an old 1980s um, effects processor called I have it here. It's the my harmonizer model H3000, which is something that they used in the 80s. So I used that for all the weird sort of effects on it, like sounding like distant and trippy, and like when the record starts to warp and stuff. And so, you know, I feel like those little details make that stuff a little bit better, you
Oh,
know.
you bet they do.
Yeah.
So the blending of that music, that's something you definitely have a big impact in doing, David.
I did in that case I did, yeah. And
Ah,
sometimes the earlier on I can work on a scene or a show, I will do sort of not only will I edit it, but I'll design it in a way and process it and kind of do things like that that sometimes don't work out, or sometimes when we get to the final mix we change it up. But it's fun to play around with that stuff. And I have some like old 80s and 80s gear that's fun to, and I've done that through all four seasons, where I've like
yeah.
used effects like that were from the time to just, I don't know, no one would ever know but me, but I feel like it
But now
makes
I'm
a
glad you said
difference.
something because
Yeah.
you know, God bless Eddie Munson and what he did. But let me tell you something.
Oh
As
yeah.
far as musical moments go, I will take that snowball dance. Like I think I've seen that scene, and it's weird to say I've rewatched the middle school dance 50 times because it makes me sound
Yeah.
weird, but like it brings back all the feels of everything that I experienced as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the genius of the
Oh, the
Duffer
one
Brothers.
the one at the end of season 2 when they're all,
Yes, that to
yeah.
me, that's
Yeah.
it. Like when they go from like from Pat Benatar to Cindy Lauper to the
Yeah.
police, it's like that's it. They got it. These guys get it. Like they
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
it, you know. And you
Yeah.
know, the kids are slow dancing and it's awkward. There's space in between when they're like, it's got everything middle school, and this is the
Yeah.
beauty of Stranger Things, David. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So, are you on for? I lied when I said I had one more question 6 questions ago.
Oh,
So,
that's all right.
like, are you on board for season 5? Is that, do you know
I
that for sure?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. I think so. Yeah. I believe I will be, unless something changes, unless, you know.
How great would it be if you showed up on set with the Land of the Lost outfit behind you? How
I
great
know.
would that
Oh my god,
be?
totally, yeah.
No, but you guys
Yeah.
as a creative unit. So David, is it when a music editor creates the vocal score and the not the vocal score, the film composition of a show? Does it also include the vocal versions of it? Does it also include, like, does it always include that? Like, so Stranger Things is a unique mix, right? You've got these wonderful guys and crew that have created this score, but you also have this vocal music that has, again, I'm going to bring up Kate Bush, like that has brought
Yeah.
millions of dollars in her right away. Like, so does it include both of those, David, or is it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. The Duffer Brothers are really smart about music, and they have really good instincts, and they always have wanted music to be a part of the story in a major way. And yeah, early on, these decisions are made about like what, you know, the songs they want to use, and they find them. And a lot of the times they're even decided on when they're shooting. And yeah, so it's a big show to put together with music, because there's songs and score, and there's really not really a lot of break in between. It's it's
But
full
but
on going.
but there's the advantage of being a music editor, right? Because Kyle and Michael have nothing to do with the vocal music, I would assume.
No, yeah,
But a
not
music editor goes to both sides of that playing field.
yeah, yeah. We're yeah, we're putting it all together. And um yeah, like the Kate Bush song, when we had it orchestrated by Rob Simonson, is the composer, who's really talented, who did the orchestral arrangement that's in episode 4 of the last season.
Right.
And you know, we had to figure out the right edit, to send Rob, that the Duffers would approve that we would send to Rob for him to like write all the string parts, and then they recorded it in London and at Air Studios. And um, it was tricky because there's a certain way you'd think if you're going to do a version of that, you want it to be a certain way, but it also like a the way it's constructed, you have an idea like that would be the most musical
Sure.
of that version. But
Sure.
because of the story and what was happening on the screen, Max just basically, or they just hit play on a Walkman, so it kind of just has to pop on in the middle of the song. But we want to have that realism, but we also then still want it to build in a way that helps the
because
the
it almost sounds muffled when you're first hearing it, because that's how it would sound if you're listening to it on a Walkman,
yeah,
right? Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so we had to find the right edit of the song that worked for the scene in the picture, and then also realize like, oh, this is going to become like a big epic moment too. So there's a lot of just thought and back and forth with the directors, and I worked with I had another music editor I worked with on the show, Lena Glickson, and she helped with that scene a lot, editing that song too, so that it was the right fit for narratively, and then also like, oh, this is going to become like a big epic moment. So it's challenging and fun when it all comes together, and it's cool to know that you were a part of some of the decisions going into making it that way.
David, people are going to want to hear this if you know the answer. What made the Duffer Brothers settle on Running Up That Hill? Like, why was it that song, or was it not? It could have been somebody else. I don't know who it was.
Yeah, I don't. I don't really know the genesis of that, because when
Okay.
I started, when I was hired on season 4 and started working, that song was sort of already in. It was already in the show.
Gotcha.
They had already, so I'm not sure. I don't know how they landed on that. It was a good choice. I'm sure there were other options considered. And
what I love about this, it brings back singers that probably should have been more recognized, the first time around. I mean, Kate Bush is very popular. I'm not saying that, but like, I mean, there's a lot of good people and singers that have gone under the radar, and hopefully with shows like Stranger Things, we bring those. I feel like people are dying to go back to the 80s, David. The older I get, it's like, this is the decade that people want to go back to. Like, I wish I appreciated it more the first time around. I feel like maybe I did.
I know. Yeah.
David, thank you so much for all this time. You're such a fun guy to talk to. And
thanks, Derek. This has been fun. Thanks for all the great questions.
Yeah.